Imagine a world where the most famous soldier in history never picked up a French sword, where the man who would crown himself Emperor of Europe, the man who rewrote maps, toppled dynasties, and made kings kneel, spent his life as a minor officer in a country that wasn't even his own, or emigrated, or died in a forgotten skirmish, or simply never mattered at all. This is not a story about what Napoleon did. This is a story about how close he came to never doing any of it. And when you understand just how thin the thread was, you will never look at history the same way again. The Mediterranean sun beats down on a small, rugged island that most Frenchmen couldn't point to on a map. Corsica, barely a year since France purchased it from the Republic of Genoa, a transaction the islanders were not consulted on, a transaction many of them would fight and bleed against for years. Into this tension, into this conquered island's uneasy relationship with its new colonial master, a boy is born. His name is Napoleon de Bonaparte. He is not French. He does not speak French. His family is minor Corsican nobility, ambitious, educated, perpetually short of money. And they have just watched their hero, the independence fighter Pasquale Paoli, be defeated and exiled to London. For the first decade of his life, young Napoleon breathes resentment. The French are occupiers. His family's status depends on navigating their patronage. But the boy who will one day command their armies grows up in a household where France is, at minimum, complicated. The outsider who will conquer a continent begins as someone who doesn't belong to it. His father, Carlo Bonaparte, is a pragmatist. He sees which way the wind blows. He makes his peace with French authority, secures a noble title recognized by Versailles, and, critically, gains access to French royal scholarships for his sons. In 1778, 9-year-old Napoleon is bundled off to the mainland with his older brother Joseph. His destination, Autun, to learn French, then Brienne, a military academy on the plains of Champagne. He is 10 years old. He speaks French with a thick Corsican accent. His clothes are provincial. His classmates mock him. And in a cold, gray dormitory far from the Mediterranean sun, something hardens inside him. He studies obsessively. He sleeps less than anyone. He reads everything: history, mathematics, artillery manuals, the campaigns of Julius Caesar, the wars of Frederick the Great. He is building something. He does not yet know what it is. Napoleon graduates from the École Militaire in Paris in September 1785. He is 16. He finishes 42nd out of 58 in his class, hardly the record of a future conqueror. He is commissioned as a second lieutenant in the artillery regiment of La Fère and assigned to garrison duty in provincial France. This is not glory. This is paperwork, drilling, long afternoons, a salary of roughly 1,100 livres a year, respectable but tight, stretched further because his father has died and young Napoleon is now the de facto financial backbone of the entire Bonaparte family back in Corsica. He sends money home. He requests leave constantly to return to the island. Between 1786 and 1793, he spends more than half his time away from his regiment, a record that, in any other era, would have ended his career. Here is the first fork in the road. A more rigidly enforced French army might have cashiered him for absenteeism. A different commanding officer, a less sympathetic review board, and Napoleon Bonaparte is simply discharged, a failed Corsican officer who couldn't hold down a posting. But the French Royal Army of the 1780s is itself in crisis. It is bloated, underfunded, politically paralyzed by the constant friction between noble-born officers and bourgeois commoners trying to climb. Napoleon, with his technical brilliance in artillery mathematics and his noble credentials, however minor, slips through the cracks and survives. In 1787, he is in Paris on extended leave. He walks the streets of a city crackling with tension. The royal treasury is bankrupt. The harvest has failed. Bread prices are climbing. Pamphlets denounce the king and queen everywhere. Napoleon, still a Corsican patriot at heart, watches all of this with the analytical detachment of someone who doesn't quite feel it's his problem. Then comes the first moment that almost erases him from history entirely. Napoleon nearly leaves France, permanently. In the late 1780s, as Corsican independence politics heat up again, Napoleon throws himself into the cause. He idolizes Paoli, still in London, still plotting, and Napoleon writes to him, supports him, campaigns for him. He imagines a future not as a French general, but as a Corsican statesman, perhaps a military leader of an independent Corsica. There are documented accounts that in this period, Napoleon actively explored opportunities outside France. One of the most remarkable, he reportedly petitioned to join the Russian Imperial Army. Catherine the Great's Russia was recruiting French-trained officers. The pay was better. The opportunities for advancement were real. Napoleon was seriously considering it. The petition was rejected. The reason recorded is almost absurdly mundane. The Russian army had a policy of reducing the rank of foreign recruits by 1 grade upon entry. Napoleon refused. He would not accept a demotion. His pride, that particular Corsican fire that burned in him always, would not bend. Think about that. If the Russian army had simply offered him the same rank he held in France, Napoleon Bonaparte might have spent his career fighting under the Romanov flag. He might have died in some frozen campaign on the steppes. He might have risen to respectability in St. Petersburg and faded from history. Instead, he stays, still restless, still without a purpose large enough to contain him. The French Revolution does not announce itself politely. It explodes. The Bastille falls in July 1789. The old order collapses with a speed that shocks everyone, including the revolutionaries themselves. The Royal Army, Napoleon's employer, begins to fragment. Noble officers emigrate by the thousands. Entire regiments mutiny. The institutional structure that trained him is dissolving around him. For most officers, this is catastrophe. For Napoleon, it is opportunity, though he doesn't fully grasp it yet. In 1789, he is still in Corsica, still obsessed with local politics, still writing pamphlets about Corsican autonomy. He has 1 foot in France and 1 foot in the Mediterranean. The revolution comes to Corsica too. Paoli returns from London in triumph, welcomed as a hero. Napoleon is ecstatic. He is 20 years old, armed with French military training, and standing next to the great man he has idolized his entire life. He positions himself as Paoli's natural military lieutenant. This is his moment. It isn't. Paoli looks at the young Bonaparte and sees exactly what he is, a man of ambition who will not be controlled. The relationship between Napoleon and Paoli sours with remarkable speed. Paoli is 67, deeply conservative, suspicious of the radical French Revolution, and ultimately negotiating with the British for Corsican protection under a constitutional monarchy. Napoleon, young, volatile, increasingly pro-revolutionary, is moving in the opposite direction. In 1793, the rupture is total. Paoli declares the Bonapartes traitors. Armed men come for them. The entire Bonaparte family, mother, brothers, sisters, and Napoleon, are forced to flee Corsica at night, leaving behind their home, their property, everything. They arrive in France as refugees. Napoleon is 23 years old. He has no home. His Corsican dream is dead. He has, finally, only 1 country left to belong to, and that country is in the middle of a revolution. He throws himself into it completely. Not from ideology, not from passion for liberté or égalité, from necessity, from opportunity, from the cold calculation of a man who has run out of alternatives. France is the last table at which he can sit, and so he will win at France. By the summer of 1793, France is at war with most of Europe and fighting a civil war at home simultaneously. The Vade is in full rebellion. The radical Jacobins have seized Paris, and the great southern port city of Toulon, home to France's Mediterranean fleet, has surrendered to the British and invited in a Royal Navy squadron. It is, by any strategic assessment, a catastrophe. Retaking Toulon becomes the Republic's most urgent military problem. Napoleon is there, almost by accident. He is passing through southern France with a supply convoy when the artillery commander of the Republican besieging force is wounded. Someone recommends the young Corsican artillery captain, who happens to be nearby. He is given command of the siege artillery almost as an afterthought. This is the second Great Fork. A different convoy route, a different timing, an unwounded artillery commander. And Napoleon Bonaparte never gets his first real command. What happens next is the first glimpse of the military genius that will terrify Europe for 20 years. Every other French commander is focusing on the city walls, on direct assault. Napoleon looks at the geography and sees something no one else has: a small promontory called Bled that commands the entire harbor. Take that point with artillery, he argues, and the British ships must leave or be destroyed. The city will fall on its own. The generals ignore him. He builds the battery anyway, begging, arguing, cajoling for the guns he needs. He sleeps at the battery. He personally trains the crews. He is wounded in the thigh by a British bayonet during one assault on the position and keeps directing fire. On December 17th, the guns of Bled open up. The British squadron sails out of Toulon within 48 hours. The city falls. The Republic has its great southern port back. Napoleon Bonaparte, 24 years old, promoted to brigadier general on the spot, writes to his brother Joseph from a Toulon that is still smoking, "I expect great things for myself." He is not boasting. He is stating a fact he has already proven. Now we arrive at the heart of what we came to explore. Because everything we have traced, the Corsican childhood, the absentee military career, the failed Russian application, the exile, the lucky assignment at Toulon, every single thread could have broken differently. Let us pull them, one by one, and watch what unravels. If the Russian army offers Napoleon the same rank he held in France, he goes. It is that simple. His pride is preserved. His finances would actually improve. And he vanishes into the vast administrative machinery of Catherine's empire. Without Napoleon, who commands the revolutionary armies, France still has generals. Lazare Hoche, arguably the most gifted military commander of his generation, is already in the field. Hoche is more politically moderate, more beloved by his troops, less nakedly ambitious. He pacifies the Vade in 1795 with a combination of military pressure and genuine reconciliation. He is the kind of general the Republic needs. But Hoche dies in 1797, aged 29, likely of tuberculosis. Without Napoleon to fill the vacuum, the Directory, France's unstable governing council, lurches from one crisis to the next. There is no Italian campaign of genius. There is no Egypt. There is no coup of 18 Brumaire. Does France stabilize? Probably not quickly. The Directory is corrupt and exhausted. Some other general, Moreau, perhaps, or Bernadotte, eventually fills the power vacuum. But neither man has Napoleon's vision. Neither man thinks in terms of European hegemony. France likely becomes a major power rather than the dominant power. The Napoleonic Code, the legal framework that still underpins the legal systems of dozens of countries today, is never written. The metric system, championed by Napoleon's reforms, spreads more slowly. And the wars. The coalitions of European monarchies that assembled specifically to destroy what Napoleon represented, the revolutionary state made militarily irresistible. Those coalitions have a different character. They are fighting France, not Napoleon. They might win sooner, or they might simply coexist, uneasily, with a more modest French Republic. Europe in 1815, in this timeline, looks less like the Congress of Vienna's careful reconstruction and more like the messy patchwork it was before 1792. Some historians argue this is better. Many nations that experienced French occupation, Spain, Germany, Italy, never suffer the trauma of Napoleonic wars. On the other hand, they never receive the shock of the legal and administrative modernization that Napoleon forcibly imposed everywhere he conquered. The liberation of serfs, the codification of civil law, the abolition of feudal privileges, all of this comes later, if it comes at all. Napoleon, as a Russian officer, doesn't just remove a general. He removes a transformation engine. Now consider a second path. What if the break with Paoli never happens? What if Napoleon remains Paoli's loyal military lieutenant, fighting for Corsican autonomy under British protection? This is, in many ways, the most personally interesting scenario, because it is the life Napoleon himself wanted as a young man. He doesn't become French. He becomes Corsican, a military commander in a small constitutional monarchy under British suzerainty, like the kingdom that briefly existed after 1794. He is talented enough to become a notable figure in this context, perhaps a military reformer, perhaps a political troublemaker. The British, who controlled Corsica from 1794 to 1796, would have found him simultaneously useful and dangerous, which describes almost every relationship Napoleon ever had with anyone. But Corsica is tiny. The stage is too small. The resource is too limited. Napoleon's particular genius requires scale, the ability to move 200,000 men, to coordinate cavalry and artillery and infantry across hundreds of miles, to hold an entire continent in his calculations. On Corsica, he would be a regional commander at best. France, without him, follows the same trajectory, but perhaps more violently. The Italian campaign, Napoleon's masterpiece, the series of battles in 1796 and 1797 where he destroyed 5 Austrian armies and forced a continental peace, never happens. Austria remains dominant in northern Italy. The revolutionary idea that the new France can win against the old monarchies is not definitively proven. This matters more than it sounds. The proof of French military superiority that Napoleon provided in Italy was also proof of concept for the revolution itself. It told the world that the new citizen soldier, the republic that mobilized an entire nation, could beat professional dynastic armies. Without that proof, the revolution's prestige is more fragile. Counter-revolution becomes more plausible, perhaps more successful. And then there is the third scenario. The bayonet wound to his thigh during the assault on Les Ouellettes is the one that history recorded. What if it had been 6 inches higher? Or infected, as wounds routinely did in the pre-antibiotic world? Napoleon dies. Obscure. A promising young artillery officer who showed real tactical imagination, but never got to prove it on a larger stage. A footnote. If he appears at all. The siege of Toulon still succeeds. His battery at Les Ouellettes has already done its work. But the man who conceived it, who fought and bled for it, vanishes from history before the city even falls. This scenario is perhaps the starkest because it involves no choices, no forks in the road, just a slight difference in the trajectory of a blade on a dark night in December. And from that chance, the entire arc of the next 30 years shifts. No Italian campaign, no Egypt, no coup, no empire, no continental system that reshapes European trade, no peninsular war that bleeds France white in Spain, no invasion of Russia, no burning of Moscow, no Waterloo. Without the Napoleonic Wars, does German nationalism still crystallize? The wars against Napoleon were the crucible in which German identity was forged. The humiliation of Jena in 1806, the liberation rhetoric of 1813, the myth of national resistance. Without that trauma and that triumph, the German states remain a patchwork of principalities loosely bound by the Holy Roman Empire's ghost. German unification, which happened in 1871 under Prussia's Otto von Bismarck, partly as a delayed consequence of the Napoleonic era's disruptions, might come decades later, or differently, or not at all. And without German unification as it happened, the specific path to World War I becomes far less clear. A bayonet 6 inches to the left, and the 20th century looks different. Before we close, it is worth sitting with a question that the alternate timelines make unavoidable. Why Napoleon? Why did this particular man, with this particular background, succeed where others didn't? Because France in 1793 had no shortage of talented generals. Hoche, as mentioned, Moreau, Ney, Murat, Soult, all would prove themselves exceptional commanders. But Napoleon was something beyond a good general. He was a systems thinker in an age of instinct. He understood that war was not just battles but logistics, propaganda, political messaging, legal reform, economic leverage. He governed the territories he conquered. He built institutions that outlasted him. And he was, at his core, an outsider. Not quite French, not quite noble, not quite from anywhere that gave him a stake in the existing order. This is not incidental. It is everything. He had nothing to preserve. He could see the old systems clearly because he was never entirely inside them. He could throw them away without sentiment because they had never fully claimed him. The revolution created the conditions, the chaos, the immigration of noble officers, the rapid promotion of talent over birth. Without the revolution, Napoleon stays a garrison lieutenant forever. But it was Napoleon who picked up the revolution's raw energy and turned it into something coherent, something exportable, something that forced every monarchy in Europe to either modernize or be crushed. He is the point where historical contingency and individual genius intersect at maximum force. Remove him, and those forces still exist. But they scatter. They dissipate. They produce, perhaps, a more gradual European modernity. Less bloody, less glorious, less transformative. Napoleon Bonaparte was exiled to St. Helena in 1815, the second and final exile of a man who had already proven, once, that exile was not permanent. He died there in 1821, 51 years old, arguing to the end that he had been a liberator, a lawgiver, a modernizer, a man history had misjudged. He was all of those things, and also a man who conscripted 3 million soldiers, most of whom never came home. A man who reimposed slavery in Haiti after the revolution, had abolished it because the sugar economy demanded it. A man whose ego made him invade Russia in the summer of 1812 with 500,000 men and bring back less than 100,000. History does not offer clean heroes. Napoleon, less than most. But the world he made, or rather, the world he violently accelerated into being, is the world we still inhabit. The Napoleonic Code's principles of civil equality, property rights, and secular justice underpin the legal systems of France, Belgium, Quebec, Louisiana, and dozens of former French territories. The administrative model of the centralized nation-state, which Napoleon perfected and exported, became the template for governance worldwide. The very concept of conscript armies, nations mobilizing their entire populations for war, was Napoleon's innovation, and its shadow still falls over every modern military draft. And nationalism, the fierce, tribal, we are a people feeling that has shaped every political map since 1815, that gave us independence movements and world wars and the United Nations and Brexit. Nationalism as a mass political force was Napoleon's unintended gift to the world. He didn't create the idea, but he demonstrated its power so violently that every government on earth had to reckon with it. None of this was inevitable. None of this was written. It required a Corsican boy with a bad accent and an oversized ambition to survive long enough. Survive Russia's bureaucratic inflexibility. Survive the Pauli break. Survive a bayonet in the dark at Toulon. Survive 100 other moments where the thread nearly snapped, to reach the point where he could impose his vision on a continent. The razor-thin path held, and the world that came through that needle's eye is the world we inherited. History is full of men and women we call inevitable, figures so dominant, so transformative, that we assume their rise was somehow fated. Napoleon is the most compelling argument against that assumption. The emperor who redesigned Europe came within a bureaucratic quibble of serving Russia instead. He came within a family feud of dying a Corsican. He came within 6 inches of bleeding out in a siege trench before anyone outside his regiment had heard his name. He was not inevitable. He was extraordinary, yes, gifted beyond almost any comparable figure, but also lucky. Repeatedly, specifically lucky in ways that were not in his control and could very easily have gone the other way. And the fact that history turned on these moments, the rejected Russian commission, the exile from Corsica, the random assignment at Toulon, should make us look differently not just at Napoleon, but at the entire sweep of human events. How many Napoleons never got their Toulon? How many transformative figures never found the revolutionary moment they needed? How many threads snapped before the needle's eye? We will never know. History only records what happened. The roads not taken leave no monuments, but they leave echoes. And if you listen carefully to the legal code you live under, to the borders on your map, to the very concept of the nation you belong to, you can still hear, faintly, the sound of a 24-year-old Corsican artillery captain screaming orders at his gun crew on a dark hillside above the harbor at Toulon. He is not yet Napoleon, not yet the emperor, not yet the legend. He is just a man on a razor-thin edge of history. And he holds,